Hi, I'm Tom Mihawk, and I'm the instructor for the University Without Walls course at University of Massachusetts at Amherst in personal finance or personal finance workshop. And I am thrilled to have with me today a former student, Vasu Raghavan. Vasu was in my module 1 and 2 courses that I taught in the MBA program at the Eisenberg School. And I found him to be certainly a personal finance enthusiast, but more than that, an expert at credit cards and the rewards that they provide. I found him to be a very thorough and thoughtful personal finance executor in his own right, a thoughtful and creative person. Vasu is an undergrad and master's mechanical engineer. He did his undergrad degree in India and his master's at the University of Cincinnati, where he and I have talked only briefly about their football and basketball programs. And he's just about to complete his MBA at the Eisenberg School at UMass. And his final 2 courses are, I believe, personal finance courses, which gives me a
Thanks.
great deal of pressure to make sure to perform well in his last 2 courses. But I'm thrilled to have him. We came to know each other also because I did some work with him on his resume, and I just found him to be an engaging and interesting person. Vasu is now 14 or 15 years out of undergrad. And so he represents for this group, this May 2021 grads that this personal finance workshop is designed for, I think a really interesting place in terms of his practice and use of personal finance. So with that, Vasu, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Great to be here.
I greatly appreciate you taking time to do this. I know this is a commitment, and so I thank you for doing it.
Yeah, no problem.
So I
Happy to
just
be here.
wanted to maybe start and say, how did you come to have an interest in personal finance? And maybe go back and tell us some of your earliest memories of how you learned about personal finance. Maybe this was in the home or with family members or not. It could be, at the undergraduate level or later, but maybe just share with our group um, how you came to have an interest in personal finance.
Sure, Tom. Happy to share that. So growing up in India in a middle-class family, we had to separate our wants and needs. And my dad was very particular about sending us to the best schools and colleges. But then when it came to spending on wants, on what we wanted, what we desire, he took a more bearish outlook. So, it kind of ingrained in me a little bit of finance and making sure that, money doesn't come free, right? And the other part, funny but relevant story here is companies in India, when they host shareholder meetings, if you attend the meeting, they give you a box of sweets and drinks. And if you hold 1 share, you get 1 box and 1 drink. If you hold 10 shares, you get 10 boxes and 10 drinks, right? So what's not to like as a kid? Your dad returns with 10 boxes of free stuff, right? And why would I not be interested in buying these stocks as a result, right? So, again, the upbringing, the free stuff, the food, it all made sense to me when I was a kid, saying, okay, I think there's value in putting money in stocks, right? And I think this is important for your listeners too, Tom. And it should be a key takeaway here is starting early in the process in your childhood is so important. Like as a parent, um, creating games or there's a lot of finance games out there for kids to learn, or making them understand the value of money through, hey, do this task and I'll pay you a certain amount, and then talk to them about what it means in short-term investment versus long-term investment. I mean, I think it's confusing, but you can make it more relevant and fun for kids. I think it's more valuable when you start young.
How do you justify denying yourself a pleasure or a luxury? Because I've talked to you in preparing for this, and I don't know if I remember talking to you about this before, but certainly discipline. And it's one thing you mentioned in the prep that you learned from your parents. But how do you do that? How do you drive a smaller, less luxurious car than you could, or eat more modest food,
Mm.
or travel to more modest places? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tom. I think it comes down to, let's take a company, for example, right? They have a budget to balance, right? You can't spend more than what you have. I mean, obviously the US government has keep spending, and we're in $1 trillion
That's very
of debt.
topical now, right?
That's right. Yeah, but for a household, it's all the more important that you balance your budget. So you set goals and you start tracking your goals. So if you know, for me personally, if you look at your expenses, there's going to be variable expenses and fixed expenses, right? Some of the fixed expenses you can't really control, like
You didn't learn that in
rental.
my course, did you?
Probably not. I don't know. Did I?
Something tells me you knew that before you came to the course, although that is something we talk about.
Sorry, I should have remembered. But to my point though is, if it's a fixed expense, it's something that you can't really necessarily control, right? You have your rental payment. I mean, you could obviously move to a different place potentially, right? But if you think about variable expenses, food, gas, I would say even car insurance is potentially variable, right? And this is something that I think is useful for your listeners. As we're coming out of this pandemic, the one thing that I did during the pandemic is I had a couple of cars, and I knew I was not going to drive. So why am I paying for insurance, right? So I did some research, and I didn't want to cancel it because when I go back and reapply for insurance, it's going to cost the same. So I ended up reducing my collision and comprehensible. And it just, why should I pay more? I mean, you do that for, every expense that you do. If you have a budget and you have a good understanding of where you want to be, I think it just ingrains that methodology and mindset. I think that's important. I think, when my wife moved from England, she had absolutely no idea around how to manage finances, and it was coaching and showing her a budget, working together on a balance sheet, right? Having her review it and say and show her, if I invest in something today, what is that impact long term, right? And show that with data. And I think it makes it a lot more fun than just saying, hey, do this and don't spend on something. Like, show it with data, and continue encouraging your spouse or your child to follow through.
Yeah, I've always found in marriage, logic is always persuasive. He said with a smile. No, but I think that's terrific. And I'm thinking as I hear you, Vasu, describe this, I'm wondering, so you've taken these courses,
Mhm.
you have a predisposition to learn this. It sounds like your parents exposed you and maybe siblings to good practices.
Mhm.
Where else do you learn personal finance techniques? How do you add to what you know?
Sure.
What are some of the influences that encourage you to get better and I remember what you're describing about your auto insurance was something that people were doing during COVID, and
Mhm.
the auto insurance companies, like other providers of services, were trying to accommodate to various degrees.
Yeah.
I think it's, but what it takes though is to know about that is awareness,
Mhm.
reading or listening or something, or talking to people to be aware this is available, having the energy, and I'm in the insurance industry a lot, and insurance companies are not the greatest providers of customer service. So you may have to make 2-3 calls to get through to somebody and get it done. So it takes awareness, interest, perseverance, energy. But I'm interested for you. What do you do today to stay on the
Sure.
ball, stay on top of these things and explore new ideas? Where do you find them?
Yeah, I think the content is all over the internet, right? But if I remember correctly, this was 12 years ago when I started investing. I started reading this blog called Money Mustache, right? And
Which is it again?
it's called Money Mustache.
Oh yeah, Mr. Money Mustache.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Money Mustache.
Yeah. He's the guy that he refuses to join a gym, and instead he lifts concrete blocks in his backyard.
Yeah, too much. I can't do it, right? So, but when you start learning from these blogs, what applies to you and what doesn't, right? And you start getting different perspectives. So I started reading Mr. Money Mustache, and I was like, yeah, not for me. Way too stingy. I'm not gonna do it. And then I started reading. No offense to Mr. Money Mustache if he's watching this video, but I started reading about this other blogger called, his name is Jason Fieber. He has a blog called Dividend Mantra. Just going through his story, he was a car dealer, and then he became financially independent and at 31. So insane, just following through on, investing, reading books, whether it's Benjamin Graham or Warren Buffett, watching YouTube videos. There's a lot of content out there, right? I think it's what fits you. But then what I do today is I don't read those blogs anymore because it's ingrained in my head. But now what I look at is instead from a macroeconomic standpoint, where can I invest? Take, for example, we're in this potentially global crisis with climate change, right? So what are going to be some of the potential investments that I can make in green energy that I won't see the benefit today, but maybe in 20 years, that should increase. I remember buying Tesla in 2011 or 2010 when it was at $30, right? it split at $1,800 and now it's back to like $700. It's just insane, right? I sold it. I mean, I didn't know
What did
anything
you
about
sell
it.
it at?
I sold it at $200 a share. So, at that time I was like, well, I made money. I'm good with it, right? But my thought was short-term gain. My thinking was short-term gains, right? But now the more I understand is the longer I sit, now that I have, plenty of years left to retire, the longer I sit on a stock or a trade fund, exchange trade fund, the better off the returns will be.
Warren Buffett and his partner Charlie Munger are always
Mhm.
talking about how slow money is the best return. And we all have seen those charts, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you haven't taken it yet, you'll see it in the investments course when you take it. I've got a chart that shows if you miss the best 5 days of the year and
Mm.
why it's so important to stay fully invested on the average. I meet people who say, well, I want to invest in digital currency and I want to invest in, well,
Mm.
I'm your advisor. I'll help you do that too.
Yeah.
But you should have a core group of holdings that keep expenses down, all things being equal, that are invested for the long term, particularly if it's long-term money, not for your wedding or your grad school, but I was
Yeah.
going to show you this. I just thought it was really interesting. This is a fellow named Jeremy Schneider. This is
Mm.
Instagram, and Schneider runs a site called Personal Finance Club, and he
Mm.
does a fabulous. He's done this a bunch of times. He'll take Tesla, for example.
Mm.
Say, person buys a Tesla model, whatever it is, Model S, and it costs $50,000. And instead, Vasu took $50,000 and bought shares of Tesla.
Mm.
And 5 years later, the Model S, even if it's Tesla, it's maybe worth the same, but his shares are now worth $250,000. And he does.
Yeah.
I've seen him do this with Amazon. I've seen him do it with a few others. And
Mm.
one thing I
And,
found,
and Tom, to your point though, right? We don't have to buy the next Tesla or the next Amazon, right? If you know nothing about, stocks, if you don't want to do the research, just put some money into exchange trade funds, right? Dollar cost averaging every
how do you
month.
how do you do your investing, Vasu? Tell us, expand a little bit.
So I have a Vanguard account, mostly trade in the Vanguard account. And then I have this fun Ameritrade account, right? Just put X amount of money, dollars in that fun account where I can do whatever. And if I lose that money, that's fine, right? But that way I'm not mixing my core investing Vanguard fund against a fun account, right? But for
Percentage wise, how much would you say is at Vanguard versus the fund? And what is the Vanguard account investing in versus the fund
sure.
account?
So if you look at my Vanguard account, it will have a brokerage account. I have the Roth IRA account, and then I have my company funded 401k, right? So, when you start investing, you got to start thinking about tax advantage, tax exempt accounts. In my opinion, I've, since the time I started working, I think the first 2 years I didn't have enough money to fill my 401k, but ever since I've been maxing it out. I've been trying to max out my Roth IRA account. HSA account comes next, the health account. Try to
And
max
these
that
are all,
out.
by the way, tax preferred. These are
Mhm.
qualified plans and tax preferred HSA accounts. Smart,
Yeah,
smart.
yeah, and then with the remaining money, you invest in brokerage accounts. So if you look at my brokerage account today, I would have most of my funds in exchange trade funds. So whether it's VIG, I'm going to throw some stock ticker symbols here. VIG, VTI.
What do they invest in, Vasu?
So VTI is Vanguard Total Stock Market.
Okay.
VT is World Stock Market. VTI is Vanguard Technology ETF.
So you're as diversified
VTG,
in the first two as you can be, global
Yeah.
diversification. Then you've got technology, which you're picking a sector.
Correct.
But I mean, technology is driving everything we do these days.
Right. And then I have another sector within technology for semiconductors. And the ticker symbol is SMH. And again, I see, look around you, right? You have car shortages. I'm trying to travel and I can't find a rental car. My car that I purchased new back in 2017 is worth more than what I paid for when I purchased it 4 years ago. It's insane. So, that's why I start following macroeconomic, right? Is to start looking at, how companies are doing, what are some of the supply chain shortages that you have, and that can last for a long time. And sure enough, that's why I jumped in and bought SMH. I'm not going to purchase NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA or some of the other semiconductor companies, they're expensive and their PE ratios are off the charts, right? But instead, I buy a sector and I play safe, right? And I think
by being diversified versus choosing one stock.
Correct.
And by the way, Warren Buffett would say, don't diversify. Have a small basket and own 15 stocks. Know well the ones you have, right? Well, Warren Buffett, I think he gets information from places that we don't have access to. I think the average person, I can remember my highest net worth client, $250 million net worth. And he was selling his company. He was an investment manager. He was selling his company to a large national mutual fund firm. And all the proceeds, sale proceeds, when he received them, he invested in Vanguard funds. I'd say to this guy, Steve, why do you invest in Vanguard funds? He'd say, because you're an active manager. You're selling your business to a mutual fund firm. He'd say, Tom, I can pick an active manager. And this is a topic for another conversation, active versus passive. Maybe we'll get to it. We'll see. But say, Tom, I can pick an active manager that'll beat the market this year, but they may not beat the market next year. Right. And I don't know who that'll be. And I'd rather get the average returns and be diversified, because I don't know who the next NVIDIA is or the next Amazon. If we knew, right, who the next Amazon was, and you could pick that in 1996, none of us would be working anymore. I wouldn't be doing podcasts, and you wouldn't be working and graciously accepting my invitations. But we don't know that. I mean, Amazon went 20 years before they made money. Yeah,
but the other hand, I think being watchful is important, right? There's a book called If It's Raining. There's a book called If It's Raining in Brazil by Starbucks, right? By Peter Navarro. And look around you, right? When you go to a shopping mall, is the Apple store queued up, right? Are there a lot of people there? And you go multiple times, are you still seeing that trend, right? It's not a one-time scenario. When you go to Target, did you see a pickup in the number of people that were going to Target? Don't you want to buy Starbucks? Don't you want to buy Target, right? Don't you want to buy Apple as a result, right? So look around you. Look around you. See what people are buying, right? When you go to stores, be watchful. And you could. I'm not saying you could time. You're not timing the market, but you could see potentially some micro trends that you can potentially use to buy if you want to buy stocks.
You didn't mention what's in your fund portfolio. Your fund portfolio.
Oh geez, my gosh, there's a cannabis stock.
That's okay.
There's a cannabis stock. ACB is a ticker symbol.
Are you bullish?
I got AMC. So
AMC.
I had to.
GameStop.
I did not buy GameStop.
Okay.
I bought AMC at $13. So I'm sitting on it.
Is it what is it now? 7?
It's at 60. 59.
16.
60.
60.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it went back down.
It went back down and it came back up again.
Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So fund accounts is a good way for me to continue to read, understand, and invest.
So I remember when you were in the course, and you shared some spreadsheets and things that you used to do things, and you were very organized, I remember. And what I tell people about budgets is, when I graduated from college, my dad gave me this plastic covered sort of notebook. It was kind of
Mm,
thin, and it had, it was ruled horizontally and vertically. And
mm,
I wrote the first month in, literally my job. I think I started July 9th, and I wrote it in, and I wrote down every newspaper and coffee and lunch. And by the end of it, and like you, I'm an engineer undergrad. I still have my mechanical pencil. And I wrote with something like this, maybe this very pencil, all these expenses. And at the end of July, I said, Dad, I can't do this. This is way too much detail for me. And, my dad, though, was trying to get me to develop good practices, good habits.
mm,
And what I've learned to do with students is to say, look, do it the way it works for you.
yeah.
If you are organized, you do it in spreadsheets. For some people, that's delightful to
Mm,
have their life organized that way. Others, resist. And I say, okay, then do it for the 6 months before you get married. Do the six
sure.
months before your kids go to school. How do you keep up with your budget? Do you use any budget apps? Do you enjoy doing it? Do you do it out of out of duty? How do you run your budget life and your spreadsheets and all that?
Yeah. Well, first, I enjoy doing it. What's not like about being financially independent in the future, right? With that thought in mind, right?
Good for
But
you.
I use Mint.
Yes,
Um,
I have done that.
yeah. So Mint's great. It combines all my accounts into this one location, and I can see and track it on a weekly basis. And on a monthly basis, I sit with my spouse and I say, hey, it's time for you to review, make sure that you understand what's going on and you understand, how to get access to all these different websites. I have, you know, through over the years, I've had Fidelity, Vanguard, actually multiple Fidelity, Vanguards for my wife and myself, and this Ameritrade account. So there's a lot of these different
Yeah,
accounts that I have,
that's
and I
easy to do.
also I also have Treasury I bonds for my inflation protected bonds. So it's all these different accounts, and see, it's difficult to manage, or let alone. I mean, I understand where to find information, but if my spouse has to go and find the information, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. So Mint's great for me to just put all the information into one location, and I can start tracking my expenses for the month. And we have budgets that we set for every month, right? For the food budget is something that comes up all the time, right? People spend, I think I read this a few years ago, people spend about $1,200 getting coffee at Starbucks. um, that's an insane amount of money to me. You could just make your own coffee and take it with you.
Do you know how
That
much a caramel macchiato costs now?
probably like $7, $8, right?
Right. Well, it depends on what city you're in, but
Yeah, too.
yeah, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So the Mint application helps me just track my budget. That way, when we when we look at, hey, do we want to go out for dinner? And then we look at how much we've spent, we're like, oh crap, it's over our budget, right? So we can't spend. So, it's not only setting that budget, it's following through the goals that you set. It's like with work, right? You have goals. If you don't have goals, what are you really shooting for? And if you don't track your goals, then again, what's the incentive, right?
How,
So
how often do you revisit your budget and check in on your goals and determine your progress?
So there's if you go on Google and type in engaging data, freedom financial calculator, it gives a nice overview of, so it's called financial independence, right? So and that's key for me, right? I want to be financially independent and not dependent on a company to pay me, and they have control over, when they want to fire me, right? So I want to be financially independent. So if you go on Google and search for this keyword, it gives you a nice
What is it again,
break.
please?
It's called engaging data financial freedom calculator,
Okay.
and it shows you the measure of your progress in terms of freedom days. So you plug in, what is your current savings, what is your current invest or current expenses annualized, right? And then what is your withdrawal rate? You could put 4% withdrawal rate, 5% withdrawal, whatever, right? You could plug all these different numbers and it gives you on a calendar, it says you're now in September 31st, you still have 3 more months for financial freedom, financial independence, right? So that's really what I use. And it's a really nice way to visually look at it. I know there's a lot of these retirement calculators. What does that really mean, right? What does 2 million mean for me versus, 2 million for you? We're all different, right? So visualizing this in terms of a calendar, looking at it from January 1st to December 31st, and putting in your current savings and your expenses and the expected withdrawal rate, you can visually look
Yeah.
at, where you're at and how many days is left to go. And it's awesome to just look at it. I was like, oh, I only have 60 days left to be financially independent.
How
How
often
cool
do you
is
do
that?
that?
I don't do that often. I know where my goal is, right? So I know I need to be at this number, and I know how much more, how long I need to work to get there, right? So I don't really use the financial calculator because I know what my target is going to be.
Right.
So I look at it maybe once every 2 months or so. But what I'm more focused on is looking at mint, right, and continue to reduce expenses, right? You can make all the money in the world, but if you don't save enough, then you're not going to be financially independent, right?
You
So
sound like you're
it's not how much you earn, it's how much you save,
how much you keep.
how much you keep,
Um,
right?
you sound like you're flirting with the FIRE movement. Have you thought about
I have thought about it. So
being
FIRE
independent and retiring
for
early?
yeah, so for listeners, FIRE is financially independent, retire early, right? I don't know if I want to retire early yet, but I want to be financially independent, right? I want to be able to do things that I want in my own time. If I want to work 20 hours, I want to cut back on the 40-hour work weeks or 50-hour work weeks and then cut it down to 20. So being financially independent is more motivating for me than retiring early. Yeah, I'm totally on that bandwagon. You know, I've and that's one of the blogs that I read is Dividend Mantra, right? He's all
Right.
about FIRE. And there's, if you go on Reddit, there are subreddits around FIRE. For credit cards, there's a Reddit subreddit called Churning. There's a lot of information. As you continue, to understand more about finances, you can start reading certain aspects of finance and start cutting down on expenses around that.
I mentioned in the when I introduced you your expertise with credit cards, and I want to make sure I don't forget to ask you how you developed it, and share with our audience some of the neat things that I know some of the neat things you've done. Maybe you've done more since I last spoke to you, but I know you've I know when the credit card companies see your name, they run the other way because
Probably.
they're having a hard time making money off of Vasu.
It's true. I can't remember how I learned it, but I think it was, following subreddit. Like I said, there's a subreddit called Churning. But it's interesting that you asked because in the last 2 months, actually maybe a month and a half, I've purchased a couple of credit cards. One is a Southwest travel card, and let me explain to the listeners why I did that. Right, I don't really travel as much, right, as I would like to. Again, financially independent would enable me to travel. But I knew I was coming out of the pandemic. I knew I was going to travel a lot, right? I wanted to travel to places that I have not been to, right? And we're planning a trip to Hawaii later this year, right? And I know it's going to cost 2-3 grand if I book the flights for me and my spouse. And Southwest had this offer for 30,000 points, $69 annual fee, and then my companion gets to travel for free for a year,
Wow.
right? So I purchased that card, right? Now there's a $69 annual fee. Now let's dissect that, right? So I get 30,000 bonus points, which is about more than $300, but let's say $300, right, worth of spend. So I had to spend $5,000 within 3 months to get 30,000 bonus points and the companion pass, right? I knew I was going to book an Airbnb with my friends. It was going to cost me a couple, $2,000, right? So I knew I was going to spend $5,000 within 3 months, without a doubt. right? So I purchased that card. I hit that $5,000 mark, right? And then I started booking my trip, and I ended up paying $500. So I live on the Northeast, right? In the Northeast coast. And then I'm traveling to California, and then to 3 different islands in Hawaii and back. So 6 flights for my spouse and me for $500, right? Now, ordinarily that would have cost me $2,000, $2,500. Let's keep it as 2,000, right? Where
Did you have to use the card at all? Did you have to charge?
I have to use the card, correct?
Yeah.
Right. So $2,000, right? So if you look at my the fees that I would pay is $69, right? Now, if you think about that, $2,000. Well, I paid $500, right? So really, 1,500 is my cost avoidance. I should have paid 1,500 more, but I didn't, right? $1,500, $69 annual fee. Now that's about 21 years for my credit card company to recoup that expenses. Not even considering time value of money, right? Because I'm getting this money now.
Yeah.
Right. But what's more interesting is every year, Southwest gives me 3,000 anniversary bonus points. That's about $30, right? Worst case scenario here, lowballing it, $30. So I'm not paying $69 annual fee. I'm paying $30. I'm paying $39. 69 minus 30, right? So I'm really paying $30 annual fee. And if you think about it, 1,500 is my avoidance. 1,500 divided by 39, they'll take 25, 30 years to recoup what I paid for already. So it's insane. It's a no-brainer for me. But I would caution, right? I would caution people to understand why they want credit cards, but be more tactical about it, right? If you have an expense coming, start doing research around what credit card makes sense to you. There's a lot of really good credit cards out there, and some might have a $95 annual fee or $500 annual fee. If it makes sense to you, I had a card that had a close to $500 annual fee because I was traveling a lot, and it would give me a $300 bonus in return every year if I used it on travel. But then I downgraded it to $0. You can always downgrade the card. I'm not saying don't scrap the card, but downgrade it if you don't plan on using it.
Vasu, what's your overall view about debt and credit? And I know you have a particular expertise in using these rewards and promotions that the cards have, but just from a personal finance standpoint, how do you view having debt, using credit cards? How do you manage your use? I mean, it's easy to credit. Some people say it's easy. One of the easiest things to do is to get credit. One of the hardest things is to pay it off.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been very fortunate. I've not had a whole lot of debt. But I think debt is good if you can control it, right? If you have a good knowledge around it, you could buy real estate, and you can rent that real estate. You can use debt to, make renovations to your house to increase the value of the house. So debt is not necessarily a bad thing.
I talk about it as good and bad debt.
Yeah. Right. So, when you start thinking about, and I think this is something that I have been trying to think about as well, because when I initially started getting into investments, I would be like, I don't want any debt. I don't want to carry any debt, but it's not a bad thing. You just have to manage it, right? Yeah. But start thinking about, if you have a credit cards charge you an insane amount of interest, right? If you don't pay on time, 15, 16%, or if not more, right?
And if interest rates go up, they don't wait to raise they just need the smallest incentive and boom, they pop rates up.
Yeah. And that's where they get people, right? So for credit card companies, people like me, it's a loss for them, right? And for, some of the other people who don't pay credit cards on time and they carry debt, credit card debt is the worst debt to have, because you just paid too much money. So I think it's just being, knowledgeable around the instruments that you purchase. With anything, right? Just knowledge is power, right? Just get a good understanding before you buy anything. If you think that you're going to spend on vacation or a wedding ring, start looking and researching credit cards that you can use, because typically they say you got to spend $5,000 in 3 months. I don't spend $5,000 in 3 months, but if I know well ahead of time that I am going to on an investment in the future, then it might make sense to purchase that card.
Yeah. I think you're also describing some personal finance discipline that's, I talk to people about behavioral finance, and I don't know if we did this in your course, but often in the beginning of the personal finance face-to-face course, I ask people to put their hand up if they're an above average driver. And in a
Mm.
course of say 50 people, I say, and put it up high so I can count it. And let's say there's 50. When I get to, 25, people look around. I get to 30, hands up, right? People start to snicker. I get to 40, start to talk. And the thing of it is, how can you have 40 above average drivers in a class of 50? Well, because we don't all make good decisions for ourselves. We're not all bad budgeters because we're lazy, although
Yeah.
some people are. But that discipline is hard, So to track the different credit cards and make sure and discharge your obligations in a smart way is challenging. I want to ask you one more for sure, Vasu, before maybe we wrap up,
Yeah.
and that is, what do you recommend for people younger than you, 22, 25 year olds? What are some of the foundation? I guess I'm merging two questions. What are the foundation personal finance elements as you see them? You think someone should know something about it? What would you recommend for a 22-year-old or 25-year-old getting started to get off on the right path?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, right? Knowledge is power. So the more knowledge that you can garner, read different perspectives, right? Don't just listen to Warren Buffett, right? Listen to somebody like Chaman, right? And I think he's like the social entrepreneur, I forget what his nickname is, but he does a lot of investing in these not really speculative, but growth stocks, right? So start getting perspectives, read blogs, stay curious, right? And start investing. If you know absolutely nothing, it's okay. Just invest in SPY, which is your S&P 500. Invest in QQQ,
Triple Q.
NASDAQ. No brainer, right? Start small. You don't have to go crazy. Don't get into this speculative, game stock mindset. I know I got into AMC, but I was not necessarily in for long-term play, but I was looking at the trend on Reddit, and I was like, well, I should invest some amount of money, right? But be careful with your money. But it compounding makes a huge impact, right? If you invest $100 when you're 25, when you retire at 60, that $100 would have gone up an insane amount. If you're talking about 6% on average historical returns for S&P, that's a lot of money over the long term. So start small, stay curious, keep reading. And I think I mentioned to you, Tom, my favorite blogs in the past, but as I started to become more mature and I started understanding a little bit better about investments, I focus on macro now, and my favorite podcast is called Marketplace. Really good macroeconomic view on what's happening. And what I'm also reading now is this book called Secrets of Economic Indicators. Really good book to understand economic trends and investment opportunities. So again, just I've made mistakes in the past. I think we were talking about this earlier, Tom, before this call, but I invested in life insurance right after I graduated from college. No idea what life insurance was. Someone sold it to me as a great idea, showed me all these great numbers, 12% returns on an annual basis. That's not going to happen. But do some research, right? And think about your life as long term. And I think about your life. There's these four main pillars. You have your health, your career, your family, and your wealth,
Nice.
right?
Yep.
So and if you look at your career, it's 30 years, 25 years, and then you're going to retire, right? But if you look at your other pillars, you have your wealth, your finance, right? Your family, and your health, right? There are four pillars that are foundational, and if any of these pillars crack, then the building crashes. right? So pay attention to each of these pillars, pay equal attention to each of these pillars, right? So finance becomes a core part. I want to make money while I'm sleeping, right? And that's what, a
Right.
lot of these bloggers say, right? Is let the money do the work for you.
Don't
You
just make
invest,
money when you're working. Have money work for you when you're not working.
right? Right. So start thinking about these four pillars early on in your life and start putting in a little bit every year. And if you can max out your 401k, your Roth, HSA, great, more power to you, right? But also start thinking about your expenses and start cutting down on your expenses. Whether it's, do I need a phone that's unlimited data plan and I'm paying $100? I'm staying home now. I don't need unlimited data plan. I can use Wi-Fi, right? Change your plan. Comcast, right? Whatever internet provider you have. If after every 12 months they increase the price to whatever, right? Call them back and say, hey, can you change the price? It's one call away, right?
Yeah, I always say,
Make a
when was the
big-
last time Vasu Comcast called you and said they had a better plan?
Exactly, never, right?
And then you
Yeah,
call them and you say, do you have a better plan? They say, oh, yes, we do. Yes.
yeah, yeah. Or I would say I want to cancel the plan and then have my wife sign it.
Right.
Right? So as a new customer, my spouse will get a different deal. So it's just, all these companies have these deals that are going on in the background, but you have to take that effort to call people and reduce that expense.
Yeah, that discipline and the effort. I agree. Vasu, before I let you go, when you're independent, what are you going to do? What do you like to do outside of your work?
Oh, I play
You like to
tennis.
travel. You mentioned that.
Yeah, I love to travel. I like I teach tennis now. I used to play tennis at a
I didn't know
competitive
you were a
level.
good tennis player. Good for you.
Yeah, so I teach tennis, so probably, I don't know, we'll see. I might do it full time. I like work right now, the way it's the where I'm at, managing people. So depending on, maybe 10 years from now that might change, but we'll see. Um, but again, I could do whatever I want, right? And that's great. Just to think about it, I could do whatever I want with my family, with my friends, with my health, and that's very motivating for me.
As I was saying before, then I'll put this on the recording. So I'm committed to sending Naval Ravikant's some of his research. But he mentioned that for him, being retired means not having to work in the present to achieve something for the future. You can do what you want to do
Mhm.
today, and that's an interesting thought.
It's powerful.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thought. Vasu, anything you want to wrap up with for our UMass recent graduates as we wrap up our podcast today?
Well, money finance can be fun. I know a lot of people, um, struggle or are hesitant to learn. I think it can be a lot of fun, and even if it's not fun and you don't like it, just think about the four pillars that I said, right? If there's a crack in one pillar, or if something happens to you and you're married and you have kids, think about them, right? You're planning for the long term. It just gives you a lot of freedom to do things. So enjoy it, but if you don't, at least invest as much as you can.
That's great. Vasu, stay with me. I'm going to turn the recording off, but stay with me just so I can
For
greet you
sure.
before we wrap up, okay?
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much for doing this. Vasu Ravikant, delighted to have him. Terrific former student, and thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Good luck, everybody.